witness. You want someone who has a calm demeanor, who can translate the complex into the simple, who can present well at trial, who has an eye for detail, who's not prone to hyperbole or exaggeration. But you also need somebody who can speak to the specifics of short-term rentals. What is an Airbnb expert witness? Well, first and foremost, I am not a legal expert. I am not a lawyer. What I am is a subject matter expert, and in this case, short-term rentals. I am a real estate agent who for the last 8 years has focused on STR investors, Airbnb buyers. I help my clients project revenue numbers. I help them navigate the regulatory environment, and I help guide them on how to set up an Airbnb to maximize their rental. There's something like 2.5 million short-term rentals in the world today. They are owned and operated by almost 800,000 people. And when you have that volume of an industry, then you are bound to have legal conflicts. If you run into a legal conflict, you might want someone who can speak to the highly specific nature of the STR industry. In this video, I'm going to discuss what kind of legal cases might require an STR expert witness. I'm going to discuss what kind of services an Airbnb expert witness can provide, and I will discuss what makes a good STR witness. Before we dive in, let's talk a little bit about what a short-term rental is. Not everybody fully understands that. I think a lot of people conflate Airbnb and short-term rentals. A short-term rental is really a rental of less than 1 month. I make that distinction because Airbnb is really just a platform on which property owners can list their homes, their condos, and rent them out. And there are increasingly a number of people who will list what they call a medium-term rental, so 30 days or longer. You might think of this as a traveling nurse model, so furnished 1 month to 3 month to 6 month type rental. And so Airbnb is just a platform. It is largely used for short-term rentals, but it is not exclusively short-term rentals. All that said, I will use Airbnb and short-term rental interchangeably in this video. Do not be confused. I just mean a rental of less than a month. All right, so what kind of cases might require an STR expert witness? There are a few different types that I've encountered. I have been serving as an expert witness for a few years now. The most common one is construction litigation. So a property owner has a home that they want to rent out as a short-term rental. Prior to doing that, they are renovating, they are having some sort of construction project to improve it so that they can make more money as an Airbnb. The construction gets delayed or somehow botched, and it prevents the homeowner from being able to rent it out, and they are suffering a financial loss because of that, lost revenue. The very first case that I worked on involved a young couple outside of Denver, Colorado that had bought a property they intended to use as a short-term rental, and before doing that, they hired a construction company to make some improvements. Mostly they wanted to add a big media room in the basement, and they had a spa-like bathroom that they wanted with big rain showers. But the construction went sideways, and it delayed them being able to list it as a short-term rental for more than a year, and they lost out on more than $100,000 of revenue. And so I wrote a report that looked at how much money that could have made during that time. So construction litigation, definitely the most common. There are some others though. For instance, a neighbor's activity is preventing you from operating a profitable short-term rental. The example I'm thinking of, it was a property that was bought, and the sellers of that property did not disclose to the buyers that the neighbors were operating a motorbike course. What do you know? Motorcycles running all day are kind of a noise nuisance and a real barrier to a lot of guests wanting to come stay at that property. There's a lot of different types, but basically any kind of case that involves a short-term rental or Airbnb, you might consider an STR expert witness. Which leads me to my second question. What kind of services does an STR expert witness provide? The majority of these cases, the construction litigation cases, an STR expert witness is writing a lost revenue report. So they are looking at the property, its amenities. They are looking at the comparable properties using various STR revenue estimate tools and trying to project how much revenue they should have made. You have to look at seasonality within the year. You have to look at variances of revenue year to year because the STR market has been quite volatile. And so, for instance, 2021 was a boom year for STRs. The revenues were sky high. If you weren't able to operate your short-term rental in 2021, then you lost a lot of money. That's very different than, say, operating a short-term rental in 2024 when the supply of STRs has gone through the roof, which pushes down the revenues. So you need somebody who can speak to those variables that are specific to the STR industry. So a lost revenue report is the most common type of report that an STR expert witness would provide, but there are other types. For instance, on that case involving a property owner who bought next to a motorbike course, I was called in to speak to what seems like an obvious point, that having a house next to a motocross course will negatively impact your ability to run a short-term rental. In addition to writing reports, just like any other expert witness, an Airbnb expert witness can be called to testify at a deposition, at trial, and they will offer their opinions based on their experience and training in the subject matter. And all of this leads me to my third question. What makes a good STR expert witness? The answer is really two-part. The first is very similar to any other expert witness. You want someone who has a calm demeanor, who can translate the complex into the simple, who can present well at trial, who has an eye for detail, who's not prone to hyperbole or exaggeration. But you also need somebody who can speak to the specifics of short-term rentals. Expert witnesses are qualified differently in different states, but largely they need to have either experience or training in that subject matter. So for instance, a short-term rental expert witness like me, I am a real estate agent working with short-term rental investors. I have helped over 60 clients close on properties that they now operate as short-term rentals. I've also helped countless number other clients who did not end up closing on a property. And all of them, both the clients that have closed and the clients that have not closed, I am running 10, 20, 30 revenue reports on various properties to gauge whether or not they would make a good short-term rental. Now, hopefully you never need me, right? You never need an Airbnb expert witness. I hope that your vacation rental runs smoothly, that it runs profitably, and that it meets your financial goals. But in the unfortunate event that you do run into a legal dispute, you might consider an STR expert witness to bolster your case.